Welcome to the Jay and Brian Show, the fastest growing real estate finance podcast in America. Today's show is brought to you by My City Lender. Here now, Jay and Brian.
Well, hello again to our listeners. Welcome back to the Jay and Brian Show, episode number 18 today, Jay.
Here we are.
Pretty darn cool. We are sitting here with Mr. Fernando Acosta. He is founder and CEO, president, not sure how you call it, president, CEO, owner, operator of Ascender Credit Services. Fernando has a lot of experience with consumer finance. He has a lot of time in the auto industry. I've got my notes here in front of me. Starting with drive time, right? You got started in the auto industry in drive time. Obviously, you had a lot of exposure to people coming in and buying cars and the financing process that was involved there, and
all in the subprime credit space. So that's kind of where I really started to understand the impact of credit on financing terms and things of that nature.
Right. Okay. And you went from there to Go Financial, which was really more of a financing specific type of company, right? So that you are now focused on helping people get financed to buy their cars.
That is correct. Yeah, a subsidiary of Drive Time. So it was all under the Drive Time umbrella. Launched a secondary finance program that we offered to other dealerships across the country and scaled that out. And also as a means to help out consumers that were having difficulty getting credit for automobiles.
Okay.
Awesome. And then you spent some time with Silver Rock Group, and that was more on the the auto warranty side.
Correct. Another subsidiary of Drive Time.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So all under the Drive Time umbrella. So all that experience is basically just about 20 years with the Drive Time family.
Okay. Awesome.
Great organization, and they just do a great job of really giving a great experience to the subprime consumer who, quite frankly, not only is it that they weren't getting able to qualify for quality financing, but the experience, it's like they also cut back on the experience just because there was credit challenges with this particular customer base. Drive Time really did revolutionize that and said, hey, they should not be compromised the experience, and that's exactly what they did. They guaranteed financing and they gave great experience, and so we took a lot from that and are applying it with Ascender.
That's great. And then you before Ascender, you were with Red Car Network, and so that you were actually now back in the sales space.
Correct.
But working on the ground level, right, with the subprime customers that you were just talking about.
That is correct. Yeah. And Red Car is really much more focused. It's Red Car in English, but we really focused our efforts towards the Hispanic customer base. And so the Hispanic customer base really lacks a lot of the credit education, more so than the general market. A lot of our customers are, first and second generation consumers. Okay. And in Mexico, wasn't a lot of credit. They're barely starting to build up their credit markets out there, and so when they migrated over to the U.S., they just didn't understand it. And unfortunately, when you don't understand something, and you end up having to co-sign for somebody, which sure, I'll co-sign kind of haphazardly, and the next thing you know, that person
they don't
defaults.
Really understand.
They don't understand, and they do it because they've got a good heart, and it's like, you need help, and you want to be able to get this truck for your father. Sure, I'll co-sign, no big deal. And all of a sudden, well, that debt is now yours. And that pay history is now yours. Good, bad. You're going to suffer with it if it's bad. And so
all of this experience that you had, we spend time trying to get to know our guests ahead of time by learning about your track records and your experience. All of it was pretty clear path towards credit services and helping people with their repair their credit histories, strategies for long-term credit health. And that's why you're here. We're excited to talk to you some more about that and all of your experience with helping people with credit. We're in mortgage, so that's a very big deal for us. Yeah. Awesome. But before we do, I did notice that you started your education at U of A, but you finished at ASU. So, what is that all about? I got to know.
Okay.
Because I'm a U of A guy. So
I'm really clear that it is a no-no, but let's be clear. If I had my cell phone, I would show you, but my heart is with U of A. I started with U of A.
Let me just quickly point out.
Fernando is basically a devil cat.
Well, no, hang on a second, because when he came in here, I happened to glance over and notice his phone. He has a U of A wallpaper on his phone. So
it's true.
Credibility restored.
Nothing gets past this guy. Nothing.
Good.
So I know
You're good.
I know your loyalties
good.
are, but I still had to ask.
I started at U of A. I had way too much fun in year one. I was cordially asked to leave the university because of my grades. I ended up getting back into U of A, but ended up transferring to ASU because my GPA was going to get stuck at whatever that low GPA was. And so I thought, well, I just need to go somewhere where I could keep the credits, start fresh with my GPA now that my head is on straight. And I did so at ASU and got my degree.
Well, good for you.
But the degree is currently under the bed. It's not being, I'm not marketing it, you know?
It is not.
It's not being marketed.
It's not on the wall.
It is not on the wall. And my heart is with U of A. It's been painful.
Wow.
It's been painful,
Gosh,
but yeah, I am a Wildcat at heart.
If my brother-in-law, Eric, is listening to this broadcast, I hope his law degree from ASU is safely underneath the bed.
Oh, man.
U of A stuff is on the wall. I know it is, actually.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we actually have a similar story now that you mentioned your story.
Fernando, you had no idea you were about to be roasted on the show.
I'm really opening this up.
I was cordially invited to academic probation about 1 quarter into my time at UC Santa Barbara because I was just awestruck by the whole awesome college experience, and I did not take it seriously enough. But I did spend the next 4 years trying to get out of that GPA basement and did pretty well.
Awesome.
Did pretty well, but
awesome.
Yeah. So I know.
You at least didn't have to turn to the dark side and go to ASU. So I did, and it is what it is, you know?
Yeah. So tremendous. That's great. Man.
But here you are now, credit expert, and we're super delighted to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come down here and talk to us. But let's just jump right into it. Let's talk about pitfalls that consumers, that people and families kind of are running into these days when it comes to their credit.
Got it. So I'll start with, I believe that there's just a lack of education with credit.
For sure.
And so, we're not there yet, but we want to really get into some inner city schools and start to establish, partner up with some schools to offer some basic credit education, because I think it's important that people understand that, if you can start off on the right foot, life is a lot easier. And so that's kind of something that we're working on. That's more of a, midterm type plan for us, but eventually we want to get there. But, at the end of the day, we're in place because we know that there's a lot of good people out there that have some credit challenges, and our goal is to help them either sidestep them before they actually become problems, or once you've gotten yourself into it, we're going to go ahead and help you get out of it. Yeah. But the pitfalls are, not knowing how to utilize credit cards or the impact of making late payments. What's defined as a late payment? Is it a 7-day late, 10-day late, 15-day late? Let's educate people, make sure that they understand what it is. And since we're on that topic, it's anything over 30 days delinquent is going to get added to your credit as a negative mark, and that's going to have a
pretty substantial negative mark
for sure. So
30 days past due from the time that it was due.
Correct.
And a lot of people don't know that.
Correct. You're absolutely right.
20, correct me if I'm wrong, but 20 to 30 point hit per late payment.
I don't know exactly what the formula is. I think it also depends on the history, but and they're always adjusting their formula. So there's and that's the other thing that people don't know. There's a variety of scorecards out there, and so the impact of some of these late payments or these charge-offs and things of that nature has various degrees of adverse effect on your credit. So
depending on who's pulling your credit, right? A mortgage company versus an auto finance company versus a credit card company.
And then scoring models are different. So
and they're constantly being updated, and so there's just a variety. And so one of the things that people constantly ask me is, hey, well, I've got this X. My credit score is X. And so, okay, great. How do you know your credit score is that? Well, I'm with Credit Karma. And so, great. Okay, great. Credit Karma is like a general scorecard, but then they go and they partner up with you guys or somebody else, or they go to buy a car and they pull their credit and it's distinctly different. And so they're like, well,
why is it so different?
Yeah, correct.
So, and mortgage generally is that FICO Classic model,
correct,
which is different than like consumer credit.
It's generally the most conservative calculation when it comes to the credit score. And I actually had this come up.
It's the oldest format too.
I had this come up exactly with Credit Karma literally yesterday. So ran the credit for the customer. in our our borrower consultation process, we try to understand where they are on their credit before we pull credit. Where do you think you are? What do you think your score is? And they gave me their number, and it was wildly higher than what the score was when we pulled it. And they specifically told me that they'd gotten it from Credit Karma, and I explained to them that the formula does vary from depending on how it's being pulled, what type of credit it is you're looking at, and it's common.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. So I think that
it's a great barometer, though. So Credit Karma is a really good barometer for seeing like the trend, like how you're doing generally with your credit. Are you going up or down?
Yep.
But doesn't translate to the specific qualification score for credit sometimes.
No, that's a good point. Well, and going back to what are some of the pitfalls that you can sidestep. One is just know what's on your credit. A lot of people think they know, and they see the Credit Karma score is X, but they've never really asked for their free credit bureau pull. They've never come to a company like Ascender. We also provide them free analysis and say, hey, look, I want to see exactly what is on my credit. And, there is the CFPB estimates that there's about 45 million records that have incorrect information out there. That's a lot,
That's a big number.
And so it behooves people to know where to go, how to get it, what does it cost, how regularly should I check it, and just to have an understanding. And an interesting story that kind of validates the need for that is, so my name is Fernando Acosta. I'm a junior. My father's name was Fernando Acosta. He passed away. And he passed away in, 92. And in 94, I believe, I went and I bought my first car. When I was going through the credit process, they're like, well, you've been turned down because of your debt ratios. I'm thinking, well, I don't have any debt. I just got out of school. So what do you mean? It's like, well, lo and behold, my father's credits had somehow been merged with mine. And so whatever he had there, business loans or credit card loans or whatever it had, it melded in with mine because I'm the same name. Yep. And that is a classic example of items that do in fact happen. And so you just want to check. You want to be aware of what you've got, and there's errors. There's ways in which to go about and get those things corrected.
Does that still haunt you, or is that something that
no, but it woke me up, and I'm thinking, oh goodness. And so if that could happen, and it was relatively benign because I was able to get that taken care of, and here's the death certificates, and so we cleared it up quickly. Yep. But it woke me up thinking, okay, if that could happen, that's a pretty big miss.
That is.
I need to make sure that I'm on top of this, pulling this. And back then, you didn't get a free credit report; you had to pay for it.
That's true. Yeah.
And so that's just a classic example. Make sure you know what's going on. Once a year is just fine.
Yeah, at least, right? So that and it's your privacy. What's the word I'm looking for here? Identity theft. So to definitely guard against that as well.
The
right?
Fair Credit Reporting Act.
Yes,
that's correct. Yes, sir. Yep.
Other pitfalls, other things that you're seeing right now from a credit management standpoint.
A common thing that we see is, again, haphazardly just co-signing for people. That is a big piece, whether it's a brother co-signing for a sister. Parents, they try to do what they can for the kids, and so they're co-signing for their first car, and then the middle child needs a car, so we're going to co-sign for them. Then they want to go and buy their home, so they want to get out of the rental situation, but then all of a sudden, all these
they've got
debt,
4 car loans.
Correct. So one thing is, map out your finances and make sure that you understand what you're doing. And so if you're going to be co-signing for somebody, great. Let's just make sure that the used car that you're looking to buy and co-sign for your daughter for her first car, carries a lower balance. If not, then you should look at alternatives. Maybe you should coach your child to say, hey, independently, you should be able to do this yourself. We got to get you a job. You got to be able to qualify for it. But that alleviates the need for you to co-sign and get tied up with that debt. And secondly, it really does demonstrate some responsibility for that child to say, hey, listen, you're getting a really good opportunity here. You can go up with your credit if you're making your payments on time. But if you miss it, it's going to go down. Yep. And then from there, you need to understand the cost of credit. What's the implication of having poor credit as it relates to the financing terms? And they're astronomical.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, dive more into kind of speaking into the lives of younger people about how credit works, because, we see it all the time.
We wish we would have had that. Our generation, we missed that whole... the whole and I love that you brought that up about the education system, and to be able to introduce, credit knowledge and education. early on for kids,
Really early on.
It would be amazing.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt.
Especially by the time they get to high school, they really should be learning about how credit works. Why is it so darn important?
Yep.
What affects your credit score? How do you manage a long-term credit health versus, we're in mortgage, so it's easy for us to talk to our kids about it. Our oldest are 14, 15 now, and so I'm always talking to them about, listen, this is what you got to keep in mind of when you're trying to qualify for a house. You got to have a good job. You have to have good credit. You have to pay your bills on time before you go to get your mortgage so that you can actually qualify for that house. And the long-term benefit to you of being able to buy a home and be able to access credit much cheaper is humongous.
That's the key. Yeah, no,
but that's not really going on, I think, in most households these days, unfortunately, because we talk to person after person that doesn't really have any handle on how credit works or what, what to do. But
people our age still have no idea.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
There's no doubt. I was reading an article recently, and I believe they're saying like 25 million records out there are unscorable because there's no credit. And so another staggering number. So that takes you out of the market instantaneously. And I see it in the secondary finance market on the automotive side, whereby, obviously the credit score is designed to provide the lenders an understanding for the risk of the client, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so if they see somebody that is, middle-aged, 30, 40, 50 years old and never had credit, that's a big warning flag saying, what's going on? Why does this person not have credit? And while you still may be able to access it, you're not going to get preferred rates here. You're going to be looking at, high teens, low 20s, interest rates, the down payment requirement's going to be up to offset some of the risk. And so your terms are just taking a big hit. And so that's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, when you're taking out a mortgage to buy a house or a loan to buy a car, or you're taking out a loan to buy the wedding ring, I mean, it's debt, and a company is issuing you debt. They're putting their money out there so that you can get that good or service. And so their best way of figuring out if it's a good business decision for them to put that money out there is assessing your risk of default. And that's really what a credit score number is, right, Jay? Mm-hmm. It's actually it's the number over your head of your risk of defaulting on any given debt. And unfortunately, I'm guessing that a lot of people in that group of all cash people who don't have credit scores, or a lot of people in that group that don't have credit scores are all cash consumers. And that's awesome, and I'm sure that they have to be very conservative and careful with their money, but it doesn't necessarily, and the banks have no way of determining this, translate to how they're going to handle their debt.
Correct.
Once they have money that they've got to pay back.
That's frustrating, I think, for that client.
And I totally understand their frustration, but that's what banks need to look at.
Well, and it's also not just about, hey, I want to buy something that I need to finance. It's about basic necessities. And so there's a lot of other companies that are collecting your information that are applying it towards whether or not we should make a decision to rent you an apartment.
Right.
And so if you don't have credit and you can't demonstrate that you've been able to pay your bills, then, life really gets difficult, because if you can't put a roof over your head.
Well, even cell phone carriers.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, they care.
No doubt about it. So, it's a pretty broad reach. And so, again, astounded that we don't take the time to really talk about that with some of our elected officials. Should we be talking about the education in schools at least the junior high level, basic finance, practical understanding of credit and the impact it has, because it really turns into a vicious cycle for some clients that just don't know how to get out of it. They're stuck paying exorbitant interest rates, and if you don't get out of that, then all of a sudden it's further dinging your credits. And so it's a nasty cycle there. So we should just stop, time out. Ascender really does, I'm biased, but Ascender does a good job of not just attempting to get things turned around for them, but educate them. Make sure you understand the impact of some of these decisions, and what does it look like when we put together your personalized game plan, which essentially is the what to do's and the what not to do's. It's not just telling them, hey, do this and don't do that. It's the whys behind it. So help me understand why that's important. I think if they understand it, they're more likely to actually go through with it.
Right. Which is why we when we are working with our customers, we'll send them a list of do's and don'ts, but we explain it to them when we're actually in person with them or on the phone of why you shouldn't do this or why you need to do this, so that they actually understand it and are far more likely far more likely to follow those guidelines
For sure.
because they understand.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's all
So
about.
here's another big question I think a lot of people have, and we've actually had this a lot from our customer base as well over the years, but like, does credit repair work?
Great question.
You know, and it's like we've even had a lot of customers who have started with credit repair or with a credit repair company, and then they start and they get into the program, and then they kind of get lost in the abyss.
And many do very well with it, but there seems to be a large number that struggle with it. So yeah,
it's a great point. I mean, I hear that a lot. Yes, it works. I think that there's a lot of companies out there that maybe do this like as a side hustle,
Okay.
and don't really put together a business plan to say, okay, this is how we're going to approach this segment of the industry with the end goal of helping individuals.
Yeah.
And so it does work. It is a process. Clients need to understand that it's not something that you can just wave your magic wand. At the end of the day, we do a great job of just going through the discovery phase and understanding, okay, what is accurate on your report? What is inaccurate, and what needs to be investigated? And then we take that from the consumer, and we handle a lot of that heavy lifting. So we'll mail things out on their behalf and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, if the investigations are yielding us results in conjunction with the consumer executing their personalized game plan, we're seeing some really great pops in credit scores. I mean, to the tune of over 100 points per month.
That's incredible.
I don't like to sell. Hey, 100 point.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, that's just a fact.
This is just what you see.
We're recognizing that. Absolutely, yes.
So Fernando, how long would you say that process takes if somebody starts, they start with the program, and then, how long would it take for them to?
That's a great question.
To get through?
So right now we're averaging about 4 months to be in our program to get up to a qualified score to be able to qualify for a mortgage.
Okay.
But everybody's file is so uniquely different that
it's like a fingerprint.
Yeah, and so it really is hard for us to we don't like to back ourselves in the corner saying, hey, we can do this, and we definitely can't guarantee results out of this. And like I said, the major part, the consumer themselves play a major part with the success of this program. It's not just about, hey, you just go and investigate these things and I'm going to expect a bump in my score. No, it's the combination of your behaviors changing in conjunction with getting some success on these investigations is where it comes to. But 3 to 4 months is where we've been recognizing some credit score bumps to the extent that they qualify for a mortgage.
Okay. Good to know.
So what is the primary advice that you give to consumers when they first come to you and they've been struggling with their credit? Maybe they've applied for mortgage, but maybe they've come directly to you guys for just help and long-term guidance. I mean, what do you tell them how do you get them going in the right direction? What's your message to them?
The first message is relax. This is a process that can help you out. So we want to get people relaxed. I mean, some people are embarrassed. Some people are concerned that they're not going to be able to get out of this, and so just relax. But at the end of the day, the message to the consumer is that it's going to be a journey. Okay, we're going to put together this game plan for you. We're going to do our thing, but we're going to be able to get you, in most cases, out of this rut. The majority of our clients have credit card debt. And so that's a big contributing factor to some of the lower scores that we're seeing. And so
are you finding that people are they following through with the plan?
We are, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
I'll answer it both ways. So when we see success, it's because they follow the plan. When we see no success, they've likely given up on their plan. And so what's
the percentage of people that actually follow through with the plan?
50-50.
50-50?
50-50.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yep. 50-50. And so now it's not just the plan. It could be scenarios to where, life happens. And so their focus has shifted from, hey, I wanted that house, but all of a sudden I've got this medical emergency or this family emergency. Something comes up. So that 50% that doesn't go through doesn't necessarily apply just to the lack or the failure to execute their game plan. But for some reason or other, they've just not finished the program.
Okay.
Yep. But going back to the point, the credit cards are one of the most common denominators that we see that are contributing to these lower credit scores. And so, and that basically means that consumers are just they're highly leveraged relative to their credit limits.
Okay.
And so a lot of people, going back to the education component, don't understand that being highly leveraged has an adverse effect on your score. And so credit reporting agencies are not going to reward you. And a common misconception is, well, but I'm making my payments on time. I've never been late. I said, I get that, but your limit's $1,000. You've been carrying a balance of $950 on all three cards. And so where you need to be is below 30%. Yeah. That's the ideal target, is get below 30%. Then you get rewarded with the formulas of the three major credit bureaus.
And I think another thing that people need to know is that not too long ago, I don't think it was maybe in the last year or so, they updated, it was a major update to the FICO calculation, especially when it comes to mortgages, where it's weighing the balance history a lot more. Yeah. So it is still true, absolutely true, that you can realize a nice fast increase in your credit score by paying down revolving debt balances, credit card balances, but not as much of an effect as it used to be. And it's still looking at the actual balance history, the DTI, the debt usage ratio average over time, a lot heavier than just where it is today. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think that
that's
the FICO. That's like 8 and 9, right? The latest.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So
great point.
So what are your top 3 tips? Let's talk short term. So we're a mortgage company, so this is what we're interested in. What are your top 3 tips for people to quickly raise their score? So along the lines of what we were just talking about.
Yep. So I would say drop your debt on your credit cards. If you can keep that below 30%. Relative to your limit, and pay it off every single month, that is going to have a great positive effect. I think the other thing would be cautious with the credit pulls. And so a lot of people seem to be shopping out there and are unaware that every single hard credit inquiry has an effect on your credit. And so if you've been shopping, I see it all the time on the automotive side, people are shopping from one dealership to the next, to the next, to the next over the course of a long weekend like Labor Day. And all of a sudden they've racked up 12, 15, 20 credit bureau pulls from all these different cars, and their scores have just tanked. Then they look at their credit card and be like, wait a second, I was just right here. The impact is quick.
Well, sometimes too, the finance managers at the dealerships will also shop. So you can go to one dealership and be with one finance manager, and that one finance manager could, they would call it like shotgunning the application,
exactly right?
To see who is going to provide the best finance terms for that particular customer.
That is exactly right. Yes,
and so you can stop one place and get 4, 5, 6 polls,
and that's a very common practice still today.
Yeah.
So I guess I might be wrong on this, but in the mortgage business, the consumer has 45 days to have multiple lenders pull their credit so they can have a chance to talk to different lenders and make sure that they're working with the lender they want to work with. And you see all the inquiries on the report, but it only actually affects their score by the equivalent of one pull when you get a mortgage. Now, I had been under the impression that covered any type of consumer financing. If they were shopping for a car, if they were shopping for jewelry, that they could, within a 45-day period, have their credit pulled multiple times, and it only impact their score the equivalent of 1. But am I misunderstanding that?
Your credit expert today does not have that answer. So I can't say that with 100% certainty because I just, intuitively speaking, I see the credit bureau pulls and it's 20 inquiries, and they're taking a hard shot to their credit. So that's something I'm going to have to look into.
So, actually, that's probably a good point to make, is that there's a lot.
That may also depend on the model, on the credit score.
Depend on the model.
Good point.
There's a lot of information out there about the facts of how credit works, and it does tend to vary from credit model to credit model, type of credit. It may be entirely possible that if you have 15 inquiries on your
maybe there's a limit,
that is now going to start negatively impacting because you've done so many that, wait, what's going on here? The algorithm's going to flag that kind of thing.
Yep,
so,
correct.
Yeah.
Well, I think they know, like maybe when they get to a point where there's 12 or 15, over the course of the holiday weekend, there's a really high chance that the person's going to be taking on new credit.
Good point.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
So it's really, that's probably more than likely why the credit score is going to get hit in that case.
Yeah, good point.
And I'd also love our listeners to know that when you come to apply for a mortgage and you have all those inquiries, you will have to provide a letter of explanation
On all of them.
On all of them.
Oh, really?
Confirming that yes, that was an inquiry, but no new debt has been opened.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
To make sure that nothing new has been opened that we don't also have to account for. So
Makes sense. Great.
something
Great.
to be aware of.
So to wrap up your question, so you said what are my top 3 tips?
Yes.
One is lower your debt. Second is watch your credit inquiries. How many people are pulling your credit? And the third is very simple: make your payments on time.
Yes.
That's just what it is.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very simple. Make that payment on time. If you happen not to be able to make your payment on time, communicate with your lender. Let them know. They're more than happy to set a date and note their system and so on and so forth. And so don't go dark, but make the payment on time.
Yeah, and I mean, and that kind of goes along with the example that we see a lot nowadays, where kids are growing up in, unfortunately, a lot of households where credit is challenged and payments aren't being made on time, and it becomes sort of a generational habit, I think, in a lot of cases. I mean, it's easy to say, well, make your payments. It's the right thing to do. But I mean, make the payments because it's really, really important for your long-term financial health. Your credit score.
Well, what's interesting? I mean, let's just apply it to something that's happening today. So obviously there's this, Biden just signed off on, the forgiveness of student loans.
Yes.
Right.
And so, that just happened, last week or something like that? And so a lot of the discussions right now are, consumers, there's been a handful of consumers that have made the comments that, well, then, should I just stop making my payments because it's going to get forgiven? It's like, well, do we know when that's going to be paid off?
Right.
And if you don't know when that's going to be paid off, if you haven't been communicated with, I think the best advice is keep making that payment, because if you end up going over 30 days, they're going to negatively report it.
Gonna hit your credit
even
score.
if they remove that debt from you in the future, you've already taken the hit.
Yep.
Don't take that hit.
Yeah, don't take the risk.
Negative credit history that's going to stay with you.
That's good advice.
I mean, will it be considered income? Has anybody asked that question?
That's a great point.
Will it become taxable? And so you think you've got this $10,000 windfall, but then you're going to owe
We're
25.
going down the rabbit hole, Brian.
You might owe 25. I'm just saying.
Where's our tax guy? Is he here?
People need to ask questions. Is all I'm saying.
It's a great point. Yeah, it's a great point.
Yep. Yeah. So, long-term credit health strategies. So I know you guys don't just do error fixing and short-term credit increases. You guys also help people with strategic plans for credit health over time and doing well with it. So what are your hot points there?
So that really just ties back into the education. I mean, our goal is not just to do the quick fix and then give them the opportunity to get a mortgage or car or whatever it may be.
Right.
But it's really like we want people to change behaviors. We want them to go ahead and have long-term benefit from going through our program. And so it boils down to the education piece again. It's like, do you really understand the impact? And we're hoping that after being part of our program that they do understand that. But it's really about education and understanding the impact of your decisions. And that's the long-term plan. And so we really look to set them up, because it's not just about the quick bump in credit. It's, long-term, maintaining that long-term.
Yeah. And getting established with credit early on, right? Is as a younger person, you should be pursuing debt on a limited basis, right? On a responsible basis to establish your credit. Now, I was going to ask along those lines about the authorized user part of credit. So, sure. I mean, it's still a thing, of course. How much is that actually impacting the authorized user's score at this point?
So, I mean, that's tough to tell. I mean, the credit bureaus are the ones that have that data, unfortunately.
But the latest updates, right? Like the FICO 8 and FICO 9 model for scoring models, like it's got less impact, I think, with the authorized users than ever before.
Yeah, because it's always been kind of a loophole for establishing credit without using it. And I've advised people along the way, absolutely get your kid a credit card, but don't give them one.
Yeah. That's a great point. Well, I mean, I know there's parents that are willing to that are getting their children signed up onto their credit card as authorized users so that they can start to establish some sort of credit history. And so it still has the impact, and you go immediately from being what they call a ghost. Yeah, so they're no longer a ghost. They got this credit history. Yeah. The impact, I mean, as their formulas change, maybe the impact and the weight of that changes. But at the end of the day, I think it's still a net positive because you've got the pay history there. And so if anything, it
And you can see it on the mortgage credit reports too. You can see how it's coded. Like you can see that it's coded A for authorized unit, authorized joint. You can usually tell.
Interesting. Okay.
But they inherit that existing credit history from the the veteran borrower that maybe had the account for 20 years or whatever.
I mean, my belief is, this bears no weight to what's actually happening, but my belief is that it should be an allowed practice and maybe weighed more heavily in favor of establishing credit, because that just tells me that, okay, someone's taken a concerted interest to help their child or whoever it may be establish this, and
like they believe in them.
Yeah, they believe in them, and that's one way in which to teach them about this, and so there should be that opportunity.
Which is kind of credit in and of itself.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
So our oldest son has a debit card that's connected to our bank account now, and he can earn money. He's not working yet, but that's coming soon. But he's now getting that experience. Son,
you're going to be working soon.
Have I mentioned that at 18 you leave the house and go off and build your own life and
but
get
before
your
that happens,
you'll
be working.
You heard it here first.
That's right.
So I should have prepped you with this question before we started talking, but I would love to hear a great success story that you've had with a customer that our listeners can learn from.
This sounds kind of silly, but we've had a ton of them. From a score perspective, last month we had a 124-point increase from one customer, and that was awesome. An average across all three bureaus.
Wow, that's incredible.
That's phenomenal.
Yes, and the contributing factors to why that bumped up is we had two trade lines that were not supposed to be on the bureau. Those got removed, coupled with lowering their debt, so it just came together and it just shot it through the roof. So
that's awesome.
So incredible. It was great, and we had several of those types of examples last month, and so last month was a really good month for us in that regard. Yeah. So
that's a great example of errors that can occur that are through no fault of the consumer at all. I have I had a Structure. You remember the clothing store?
I do remember Structure.
Back in the 90s.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
I had a Structure. It was a First USA credit card for Structure. Used it for about 6 months, paid it off, closed it with Structure, and 10 years later, it was still showing up on my credit account as open. And I actually made the mistake of closing it because it was an account that was zero balance and it had a forever.
Are they still around?
Good Structure?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I don't know.
No.
Wow. I don't think so.
I haven't even thought about that for 20-some years.
Abercrombie's still around, I think.
Yeah. I think. I don't think.
But you always have to be looking.
So that's a really good point in terms of going back to credit tips is closing accounts. And so the recommendation is to drop balances, keep them at a zero balance, use them very conservatively, but don't close out any of the accounts, because if you close out the accounts, you're losing available balance, and then your debt ratios get all screwy on you. So don't close out your debt. So your credit.
I have a great don't close your accounts story that's not my own. So it was actually very shortly after I got into the mortgage business almost 10 years ago. And I had a customer come to me, and they were you could tell that they were very sophisticated financially, that they had all their ducks in a row. He was confident his score was 780 plus, and when I pulled it, it was 730. And when I took the report to him, he was aghast. He was like, how in the world is my score 730?
Mad.
And I said, well, sir, I can see that you closed a Bank of America credit card that you had for 18 years last month, and a Citibank credit card that you'd had for 16 years last month. And the Bank of America card had a $20,000 limit, zero balance.
Oh, man.
And a $17,000 limit.
Wow.
And this was credit he'd had for a very long time. And the message there is a major part of your credit score. And being able to have a score 750, 60, 80 plus is having debt for a long time and really good standing.
For sure.
And when you close that debt, you're removing good debt from the scoring model, and then it's left to score whatever is left. And so he was very disappointed, but it's an understandable mistake because he was being responsible. And that's one of the things that we just try to do is help people understand there's a difference, but credit responsibility is key, number one. But there's also do you need to know when you're qualifying when you're going to qualify for a loan of any kind, not necessarily mortgage, but what's going to actually affect my score and consequently my cost of borrowing that money, even though I'm a totally responsible dude and I've paid off all my debts and I've closed some accounts that I don't need, and that's actually going to adversely affect you.
Great example. Yeah, great example.
And correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but like in that guy's scenario with those 18 and 16-year-old accounts, if he would have just gone and kind of like woken those accounts up by purchasing like a shirt from Structure and then paying it off, like right away.
That's exactly what you're supposed to do. That is a great thing to do. Yes.
Okay. I mean, even if it's walk into a convenience store and buy a bottle of water.
Yeah.
And pay it off. Yeah. You've used it. And that's actually a question I've had. I've read it in several places, but as far as the mortgage scoring formula is, if it hasn't been used in the most recent 4 to 6 months, it can drop off from being a positive
interesting
trade line, an account on your score.
And it becomes more neutral.
More neutral, yeah. Yep. Yeah, you lose the benefit of it.
You get the positive scoring value if you just wake it up or wake up a dormant account.
You still have the history, but
Yep.
Yeah.
One other point that just popped into my mind as you're talking about the length of history here is, a lot of people don't know how long do things actually stay on your credit report. So if you happen to have, some charge-offs out there, it's like, great, how long do I have to suffer with these bad accounts on my credit report? And the answer to that is 7 years. Mm-hmm. And so all your credit that's on there is on your bureau for 7 years. If it happens to be a bankruptcy stay on there for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And some public records as well can also, public judgments and things of that nature can also stay for 10 years. But your trade lines will follow you for 7 years.
Good to know.
Yep. Yeah. At a minimum, the negative scoring follows you, right, for that amount of time.
Correct.
And I've heard that the creditors, even though there's a time limit for how long the negative event can affect you, depending on the creditor, I think, depending on the situation, they can still keep throwing it on your credit report as a way of trying to get you to pay it off in time. Is that true, or do they have to fall off in 7 to 10 years?
Well, it has to. Yes, it has to fall off after 7 years. Okay. But if a debt gets sold to a credit collection agency, then that 7 years starts fresh.
All over.
So what people
That's
don't
what
know is that you could potentially be getting dinged twice. So if you charged off a Structure credit card and then after 90 days, they're charging that off. They're deeming that debt uncollectible. Mm-hmm. They're going to sell that to a third-party agency, a collection agency, and that collection agency is then going to contact you. And if you happen not to pay them, they're going to report negatively on your credit as well. And so
another thing on that one too, sorry to interrupt you on that, but like when we'll see these collections report and then it shows up almost like a fresh account every month.
That's correct.
Like it'll show up as 1 month reported,
which is really, really negative on the credit score because it's it's like brand new
every
derogatory credit every month.
Yep.
Yeah. So when we come across scenarios where we see customers that have charged off accounts and they haven't yet been sold, immediately our recommendation is for them to contact the creditor, see if they're willing to settle.
Try to settle.
A lot of them do. Some definitely do not. But a lot of them do settle, and they're willing to remove that from the credit bureau in some instances.
Mm-hmm. Is that the only way to get them to stop, to have them stop reporting them every month like that? Or is
well, each company's different. They make their own decisions.
Okay.
But that is definitely one way in which to get them to stop. If someone were to contact them and say, hey, this is what I got, I'm willing to settle with you guys, but I'm doing so contingent upon you not reporting this anymore.
Stop.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Fernando, it's been an absolute pleasure to sit down here and talk with you, and really appreciate again that you took the time to come down.
Thank you so much for
talking to us about credit. It's a really, really important thing that I think a lot of people need to hear about and learn about, and I love what you're pursuing about education. Of credit education at was it elementary school level that you were talking about, or
I'm thinking more junior high.
Junior high, okay, yeah, awesome.
Yep,
that's a huge deal. Let us know how we can get behind you.
We would absolutely advocate that.
I appreciate that.
That's a huge deal.
Totally.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and our listeners, guys, if you have any questions about credit, please look up Fernando and the Sender Credit Services. It's a sendercreditservices.com, right?
Sendercredit.com.
Sendercredit.com.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Yeah, definitely check them out. They do it all, and they'd love to help you out as well. So, Fernando, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks again.
Appreciate it. Bear down. Thanks, guys.